Hello, thank you. Yeah. So in case you're confused, I'm Andy. This is Katrina. So, and I also go by Andrew. So yeah, as I already told you. So we're both from an organization called ESNet. So that's what we do for our day jobs, right? So that's basically, I'm guessing a lot of you haven't heard of that. So that's a network that connects the U.S. national labs together. We kind of, a short way, when I explain it to my mom, is like we're the internet service provider for science. But that's a very permanent network, luckily for our job security. What we're actually going to talk to you about today is something that Katrina and I volunteer for every year, which we like to call the world's fastest temporary network. So what exactly do we mean by that? So every year, there's a conference called Supercomputing. I might get crickets on this one, but has anybody heard of the Supercomputing conference or been to it before? All right, I see a few in the crowd. It's a pretty big conference. There's over 15,000 people that attended last year. These days especially, it's a pretty cool place to be with all the AI stuff going on and quantum and things like that. So basically the idea is industry and academia kind of come together to kind of showcase the latest and greatest in high performance computing and networking and storage. It's set up kind of like a big trade show, so a giant exhibition hall. If the exhibition hall was like a football stadium in the attached conference center, which it was last year in St. Louis. And so to support all that stuff, you need a pretty good network, right? So just like here at GrafanaCon, you guys are probably on the conference network right now. If I drone on too long and get boring, you'll probably be paying more attention to that than to me. And so SCinet's no different, but there's actually two parts to that network. One is your traditional kind of wireless network for the attendees and the booths and things like that. But the more interesting aspect, and the one we're going to be focusing on today, is kind of the second piece, which is a research network where people do all these really cool demos and things like that. So what exactly do we mean by that in terms of scale? So it was already mentioned. So the speed of this network last year, it gets bigger every year. So it doesn't happen until November. I don't know what the final number will be for November, but it'll be greater than this, right? So 13.72 terabits per second was the total bandwidth. Probably most of you are, technical, so have an idea that that's pretty big. But I looked it up. In the U.S., the average connection speed for like a home internet connection is 300 megabits per second. So this is like 45,000 times faster than that. And you're also already told how fast you can get Grafana on that. So it's pretty fast. What else is cool about it is not just like the speed, but how it all comes together. So over 200 volunteers, so all volunteers are make all of this happen, right? And so you have people from different networking specialties, and there's like systems folks and things like that. That they get from a bunch of different institutions all around the globe to put this all together. And then all the hardware is all donated. So it's over $70 million in hardware, which is a pretty good amount. We have to fit it all on 31 pallets of gear, which fills up like 2 big trucks that they take to the conference center. And there's a bunch of fiber that needs to get laid and all of that. So a lot of things that need to come together. So kind of our mantra for all of this, which was already kind of alluded to, was it takes 1 year to design, 1 month to build, 1 week to operate, and 1 day to tear down. So basically, there's a bunch of planning to acquire all the loaner equipment, figure out all the volunteers, get everybody kind of on the same page. And then about a month before the conference is when we actually show up to the site and start building all of this. Now, what's fun about this is, these are big conference centers. They have other things going on in the preceding weeks until the conference, right? So we can't just like build the network in the middle of where we want to showcase it. So there's usually a staging area that they set up for us. We build all that. We take the $70 million of equipment, and then a few days before the conference, we get a forklift and all very nervously watch as they move all of this equipment into its final place. So then once that's in place, eventually the conference starts. In some ways, that's usually common because everybody's like running around trying to get everything working before the conference starts. But once it kind of settles in, usually most of the stuff works. So you maybe have a few fires to put out here and there, but you're in a pretty good spot. And then you put all this work in over the year, and it kind of as life goes sometimes, on the last day, it's just you kind of rip it apart and you're all done. So I guess the one solace is, though, if you're going to participate the next year, basically you're right back into it with the planning. So this has been going on for 35 years. So the first one was in 1991. You can see the diagram there. That's a little fuzzy. And these days, we're a little bit faster as these things go. So 56,000 times faster than they were in 1991. So been doing this for a while. Okay, I talked about all of this stuff that comes together, all these people volunteering their time, but like, why do they do all of this? And so to kind of describe that, I need to zoom out just a little bit and talk about kind of a little bit more what's like the day-to-day life for Katrina and I. Basically, if you're not familiar with kind of big scientific research, there's a pretty similar setup. There's a lot of different disciplines, but there's a lot of these like big scientific instruments all around the world, right? So I've got a couple pictures up there. One's the Vera C. Rubin repository in Chile. It takes like these highly detailed images of the night sky and produces like terabytes of information, like with each image that scientists want to get access to. On the other side is the Large Hadron Collider, or the LHC, which is on the border of CERN in Switzerland. So that's a big particle accelerator. They're smashing atoms together, have these sensors that detect them and generate like petabytes of information. And again, needs to be shipped all around the world. So the scientists that want access to this data and actually use this data to make discoveries aren't where the instruments are. And furthermore, to actually like analyze the data and sort out the interesting stuff, they usually need to ship those data sets over to supercomputers, which then are yet a third location. So I've got a middle one there that's in California, actually a floor below the home base of our organization. And so basically to make all this happen, you need really good networking is kind of the point. Right, and so one such network is ESNet, who Katrina and I work for. And as I mentioned, we connect the U.S. national labs funded by the U.S. Department of Energy. And so you can kind of see where we have like routers and equipment on this map, which I will say this is our first Grafana panel we're showing. And networking folks love maps. Pretty much our running joke is if you have any type of demo or anything, you basically guaranteed you're going to have a map in the networking world. And so this is actually a plugin that Katrina wrote, one of many, and you'll see some more, that you can get from the official Grafana kind of plugin list. Like if you search for it in the plugin panel or search on the website, it's there. You can build all sorts of maps. So this one is obviously a kind of a world map, a geographic map. Keep that in mind because you'll see this again later, but it'll look very different when we're talking about the conference itself. Okay, so there's a network like ESNet, right? We serve science. We've got to serve these use cases that generate tons of data. Well, we're not the only ones, right? And so like when a packet, essentially, or data is traveling around the world, it's going to hit a lot of these different networks as it goes, right? So like we're in Barcelona today. I mentioned the LHC. There's a tier 1 site called PIC, which means they host a lot of the data. If you want to send some of that data over to the US, you're basically going to hit PIC's network. There's a Spanish network that serves kind of the Spain research and education community called Red Iris. It'll hit that. There's a European national backbone called GEANT. It'll then hit that. It'll go on an undersea cable over to the US and hop onto ESNet and then off to wherever it's going to go, right? So that's a long way of saying that there's a lot of things that can go wrong from end to end as that data travels from one place to another, right? So we've got a good picture here, right? I mentioned the undersea cable. Those are actually pretty important pieces of kind of global transfers like this. We saw that shark there, thought it looked pretty tasty. He actually didn't get through it. It didn't cause any problems. Much more likely in that case, you have to worry about anchors getting dragged on things, intentionally or unintentionally. If you want a fun online dumpster dive tonight, the geopolitics of undersea cables is actually kind of an interesting one. But there's also maybe some more of the usual problems of you're basically hitting a bunch of different organizations as you go, right? So there's different hardware platforms, different policies, different firewalls. And for ESNet, we kind of sit in the middle. So we can see stuff on our network, but we can't necessarily see stuff on other people's networks. And all our customers know is their data is not getting there as fast as they want or things like that, right? So that's all kind of leading into in the networking world, collaboration is super important. We have to have good relationships with these other networks. And what we're normally working on too is open source projects to share data between networks. So Perf Sonar is one, MetrANOVA is another that we'll kind of drop. And so Grafana fits into there really well because it's open source nature. We actually use that for all the visualization of this data. And again, I'm showing another panel that Katrina created. That's one of the official ones. That basically is a grid structure. So a lot of what we deal with is, source, destination, how are things performing. So you've got rows, that's the source, columns, the destination, and you can get a quick summary of how things look, right? All right, so let's bring this all back to SCinet, the conference, right? So why do people go to this conference, right? So I've kind of talked about the worldview of things. Well, it's a really great chance for all these people to come together, right? And as I mentioned, collaboration is really important. So that's why people are sending their folks here, our folks to kind of help build that, is it's a great chance to get hands-on networking, learn from others, try new things, which is kind of what we were doing in the network measurement space. And so it's really appealing for all of those reasons. And so there's all these, once you've built this network, there's all these cool demos that happen. I guess if any of you have any huge data that you want to send around, you can apply for one of these. But there's stuff like, AI-driven networks. There's new data transfer services, all this programmable hardware that people are trying and stuff like that. And they actually use almost all of that bandwidth that I mentioned. There's this data tsunami on the last day where they basically fill that pipe, which is, it's actually really hard to generate that much data on the compute side. So it's pretty cool to see all that. And so then I'll hand it over to Katrina to talk a little bit more about how that actually goes.
Right, so this sounds like a super cool project, right? But why have none of you ever heard of this before? Why don't more people know about this? And the answer is pretty straightforward. We need better storytelling. Network engineers are super smart, but they're not really concerned with do people know what I'm doing or not? They just want to make sure their network works, right? So they called me and Andy, and they were like, yo, we need some viz. And we're like, all right, cool. Here you go. No, but really, I wish it were that simple. So how did we go from this diagram to this super cool viz down here, which is actually the same panel, the same type of panel plugin as the network map that Andy was showing earlier. So we didn't come empty-handed. We had, this is our day job, like we said. So we had a bunch of stuff to rely on. We had this MetrANOVA pipeline that we wanted to kind of test out. We had this thing called Terranova. We had some super sick Grafana skills, which was really helpful. And that kind of all lent itself to what we actually had to do when we got there. So I would like you to imagine with us, we get there on day 1. We're like, all right, let's go. And then on day 7 is actually the opening of the conference, so that's showtime. And I know you're thinking, you had a year to design this. We sure did. We started on day 1. It was really fun. So you're probably wondering at this point, what is MetrANOVA? You've said this 5 times. So MetrANOVA is a consortium. It's the name of the consortium as well as the product. But it's basically dedicated to network monitoring and observability. So like we said, we work at SCinet. We do all of this observability. There's a bunch of other RNE networks that also do observability. And then there's a bunch of smaller networks that would like to do observability, but maybe don't have the same resources that we do. But we think everyone should have great observability on their networks. So the consortium is kind of dedicated to coming up with a nice open source stack that anyone can deploy on their networks and get a good view of what's going on. It's pretty new. Andy just wrote a brand spanking new pipeline for it. It's pretty great. And we wanted a place to test it. So why not a 13.72 gigabit per second temporary network? Sounds great. But that's still a lot of work to do in a week, right? So that's why there's 2 of us. Luckily, Andy is really cool and can do all the back-end stuff. So he was in charge of getting all of the data, getting it through the pipeline, gathering up the metadata, getting that into the pipeline, kind of worrying about that stuff. And I was like, I'll go make some pretty pictures. See you in a few days. So we kind of split the work streams up like that. So it sounds pretty straightforward. Again, we do this in our day-to-day lives. We're like, all right, let's go. But it's SCinet. And with SCinet comes struggles, as always. So the first few days, like we said, it's our first time on the project. So we were like, all right, who do we get the data from? Who can turn this on for us? What do we do? So Andy was running around trying to figure out who to talk to. We had metadata coming in from a couple different sources because they switched out their inventory system this year, so that was fun. So we had to figure that out, figure out what was even available, all of that stuff. And then on my side, also figuring out what metadata do we have, how do we turn that into an interesting story? Because that's what they brought us in for, right? Is to get people excited about SCinet and to tell this story. So how can we do this? And one step further, how can we do this on these essentially just TV displays that will be cycling through in kiosk mode around the conference center? So not your normal dashboard case, right? And I'll say Andy worked super hard, but since this is a Grafana conference, I'm gonna just talk about the Grafana stuff on the front side. So kind of what we landed on for our solution to kiosk mode was that we would do the standard 1 question per dashboard. And this was really helpful for a couple of reasons. One, again, we were trying to draw people in and get them interested. So hopefully these questions would perk their interest, bring them over, get them looking at it. So we put it nice and big at the top of each dashboard. And we kind of themed each of those dashboards around it. So instead of one large dashboard with a couple of tabs that you can kind of click through, we were chunking it into these very small sort of kiosk mode pieces. So we had a question at the top, hopefully to draw the person in, and then also to give them some context around what the dashboard is, what am I even looking at, right? Because again, they're not used to looking at this type of stuff. So we started with some basics, standard stuff. How much traffic is there moving across the network? So we used the time series graph. Who's using the most bandwidth? We used this bump chart. The little QR codes are for the plugins because some of them are custom that we've written or other people have written. What are the usage patterns? When is SCinet the busiest? That was a fun hourly heat map plugin that I was like, guys, just wait till the last day. It's going to look super cool. And then it did. And we kind of were working through all of these. We had a good set of dashboards. We were pretty happy with. But I was like, we need something else. We need some eye candy. You know what? People like maps. So I was like, all right, well, how are we going to get a map? And then we came across, the conference website, and we're like, okay, well, there's this map of the showroom floor, so we should be able to grab those coordinates. We'll plug it into Terranova, which is one of our projects, which basically just outputs a map topology that you plug straight into our network map plugin in Grafana, and you just get a map in Grafana. It's super great. It's really easy to use, and then you can attach your data to it. We're like, yeah, this would be really cool. We can show where the network traffic is going, on the showroom floor. All right, cool. Where's the coordinates? There were no coordinates. So we thought it was a really good idea, and I didn't want to give it up, and I'm pretty stubborn. So we just threw a grid on top of the screenshot, and then I hand-typed in hundreds of coordinates for each of the booths across the showroom floor, because what else am I going to do? I'm stuck there. We're waiting for data. But I did get pretty tired of it, and I called in some reinforcements. Shout out to my intern, Ethan. He's literally down for anything. Really great. So he had a few hours before his class started, so we sat there and we plugged in a bunch of coordinates. And then so when we were done, we put it through Terranova. It was great. We had a map. There was still no data going into that map. And about now, we are on day 4. So if you're keeping track, day 7 is when the conference opens. So day 4 and 5, we had a bit more struggles. Andy had found the people that we needed to talk to, which was great, but they were a little bit busy. There were some fires they were putting out, getting the network up, important things like that. They weren't super concerned with monitoring because, again, they were more concerned with getting the network up for the conference, which you can't blame them. So we were kind of just trying to figure stuff out with them, see if there was stuff that we could do. Usually it's pretty straightforward to turn monitoring on your routers, but for some reason it wasn't this time. Because SCinet. And so just kind of working through that and getting that all figured out. At this point, I had pretty much all of the dashboards built. Luckily, we had some test data that we could use, so we were pretty confident it would all work, 99% confident. And we had, we'd put it in public dashboard mode, which worked great, by the way. We had the pies displaying it on the TVs or on the conference. We were pretty confident that stuff would work if we could just get some data. So finally, on day 6, things happened, stuff worked out. Andy got the data connected. He's like, it's in. It's going into ClickHouse. And literally, I kid you not, it was like a movie. He was like, enter, it's in ClickHouse. And I was like, cool, let me hit refresh. And then, ta-da. And we did. We had lights light up, and we were super stoked. Okay, we're sitting in the corner like, yeah, super excited, like, good job. And like everyone is still running around putting out fires. Like, what are they doing, nerds? Why? All right, cool. So we spent the next, remaining of the day. I say a few hours. It was probably less. It was probably like 1 hour, just making sure, double checking all the rest of our dashboards. They did indeed work. Miracles. And then we're like, well, we've got like a couple more hours. Like, what else can we do? So we made another dashboard with another map because we like maps. So this one you probably recognize from earlier, but this time it was specific to SCinet data that was coming over ESNet. So we thought that'd be cool and it would like make our bosses happy. So we threw that one in there too. And then we got to day 7 and it was showtime. So like Andy said, we kind of just were like, woohoo, it's done. Let's just walk around, see if it's working. So we got to show our bosses. They were pretty happy. They got to show their bosses, which was pretty cool. We took a bunch of pictures, walked around, saw what was up. Just like to put it out there, the light mode one with the pie chart, that's not ours. So like no responsibility for that one. But the nice purple and blue ones, those were what came out of what we did. So it was really cool. We caught some people talking about our stuff, pointing, having conversations about it, which was really the point, right? If we go back to the beginning, we wanted to tell a story. We wanted to get people engaged and have them talking about this network that all these people put all of this time and effort into. And so was everything perfect? No. Is there a lot of stuff we want to do next year? Yeah, for sure. But did we have more engagement than before? I think so. And so we call that a success. But of course, we are looking forward to this year already. Like Andy said, basically, as soon as you're done, you're planning for the next year. So we've got big plans. We want to grab some more metadata, tag the flows with some more stuff, maybe hone in on specific use cases. We've got all these plans for cool dashboards, maybe do some stuff for the network engineers in the back, all of this fun stuff. We'll see how much we get to. We had some plugin improvements we wanted to do. Like we said, a lot of the plugins that we use, we developed in-house. So if we want new features, we have to then do them. So I've started on that. So that's coming along. And then maybe start like sooner than a week before. That's kind of our main goal this year. So we did attend our first meeting last night. So yeah, we're getting there. And so thanks for listening to our talk. Feel free to put questions in there. And if you wanted more of those QR codes, we threw them up here for you.